Mr. President, the French ambassador requests an urgent meeting. Foreign Minister Olivier Rouamba burst into Ibrahim Traoré's meeting, interrupting the tense cabinet session. Ambassador Jean-Claude Bertin is extremely agitated and says he wants to deliver an ultimatum. Traoré smiled calmly. "Olivia, we're the ones who want to deliver an ultimatum, not them." At that precise moment, his secure phone line rang. Mali President Assimi Dembélé was calling. "Ibrahim," Dembélé said, his voice carrying the weight of history, "this call will last only 3 minutes, but it will change Africa's future." June 18, 2024, 2:30 p.m. An extraordinary tension permeated the presidential palace of Burkina Faso. For the past 2 weeks, the radical decisions made by Ibrahim Traoré had shaken not just his country, but all of West Africa. The decision to exit the CFA franc system, the expulsion of French military forces, and most significantly, the nationalization of gold mines had apparently plunged Burkina Faso into an international crisis of unprecedented proportions. Traoré had been evaluating the economic consequences of these recent decisions in a cabinet meeting that had begun at 9 a.m. that morning. The figures presented by Finance Minister Dr. Rosine Coulibaly were deeply concerning. "Mr. President, French banks have frozen our accounts, the European Union has suspended trade agreements, the IMF has cancelled all credit lines. Our foreign exchange reserves are depleting rapidly, and our ability to conduct international transactions has been severely compromised." "Rosine," Traoré replied in a measured tone, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had anticipated these exact consequences, "these numbers don't frighten me because this money was never truly ours. We were merely custodians, never the actual owners of our own wealth." Interior Minister Colonel Paul-Henri Damaba interjected with growing concern, "Mr. President, the problem extends beyond economics. Domestic unrest is increasing throughout the country. Several opposition groups are preparing to take to the streets, and our intelligence suggests they may have external backing." "Paul-Henri, this is exactly what we expected would happen. We're dismantling a system that has operated for 60 years, a system that people have become accustomed to despite its fundamental injustice. Of course there will be resistance, both internal and external. But remember, this system has impoverished our people while enriching foreign interests and stealing our natural resources." As the meeting continued with increasingly heated discussions about the immediate challenges facing the nation, Foreign Minister Olivier Rouamba appeared at the conference room door. Her face reflected a tension that was unusual even for these extraordinary times. Under normal circumstances, she would never dare interrupt an ongoing cabinet meeting, but the gravity of the current situation had rendered normal diplomatic protocols irrelevant. "Mr. President, I deeply apologize for this interruption, but we have an urgent situation developing," she said, slightly out of breath from having rushed to deliver this message. "French Ambassador Jean-Claude Bertin has requested an immediate meeting with you. He appears extremely agitated and has explicitly stated that he intends to deliver what he termed a final ultimatum to your administration." Every cabinet minister in the room turned their attention to Traoré, understanding that this was the moment they had all been anticipating with a mixture of dread and determination. This represented the culmination of France's diplomatic pressure campaign, which had been building steadily over the past 6 months. Ambassador Bertin had been opposing Traoré's policies since the young leader first announced his intention to fundamentally restructure Burkina Faso's relationship with its former colonial power. Now, the gloves were coming off, and France was prepared to deliver its threats openly and directly. Traoré leaned back in his chair, and a slight smile appeared on his face, an expression that seemed almost incongruous given the gravity of the situation. "Olivia," he said in a voice that remained remarkably calm despite the enormous pressure, "please inform Ambassador Bertin that we are the ones who wish to deliver an ultimatum, not the other way around. The days of France dictating terms to sovereign African nations are coming to an end." The cabinet ministers exchanged glances of amazement and concern. Traoré's composure in the face of such direct threats was either evidence of a masterful strategic plan or the beginning of a very dangerous gamble that could destroy not just his presidency, but potentially destabilize the entire region. At that precise moment, as if orchestrated by destiny itself, Traoré's secure telephone line began ringing. This particular phone was reserved exclusively for the most sensitive communications, a direct line that only a handful of African leaders possessed the number for. When Traoré saw the incoming number displayed on the encrypted device, his expression immediately changed from calm confidence to focused intensity. Mali President Assimi Dembélé was calling. Over the previous 6 months, Traoré and Dembélé had developed an increasingly close working relationship built on shared challenges and common goals. Both countries faced identical problems: French military presence that seemed more like occupation than cooperation, economic dependency relationships that drained wealth from their nations, and systematic resource exploitation that benefited foreign corporations while leaving their own people in poverty. However, this phone call would transcend mere bilateral consultation and represent something far more significant. When Traoré answered the phone, Dembélé's voice carried a mixture of determination and excitement that was immediately apparent to everyone in the room. Ibrahim, today is a historic day for our continent. This conversation will last only 3 minutes, but I can promise you that it will change Africa's future in ways that we have only dared to dream about until now. Assimi, I'm listening, Traoré replied, simultaneously signaling to his cabinet members to maintain absolute silence during what was clearly going to be a conversation of extraordinary importance. Ibrahim, as we speak, Niger President General Abdourahmane Tiani is sitting here beside me in my office in Bamako. The three of us have reached a consensus because France's pressure tactics have reached an intolerable level, and the systematic exploitation of our resources can no longer be accepted. With your actions in Burkina Faso, you have opened a path that all of us must now follow. Traoré felt his heart rate accelerate as he realized that this was the moment he had been planning and hoping for over many months of careful preparation. Continue, Assimi. What exactly are you proposing? Ibrahim, we have made our decision, and it is irrevocable. Mali, effective immediately, is withdrawing from the CFA franc system completely. We are also serving formal notice that all French military bases must be closed within 30 days, and we are nationalizing all strategic mineral resources currently under foreign control. The cabinet members in Traoré's office immediately recognized from their president's facial expression that this was not merely a bilateral conversation, but rather a historic coordination that would reshape the geopolitical landscape of West Africa and potentially the entire continent. What about Niger's position? Traoré asked, understanding that the success of such a bold initiative would depend entirely on coordinated action across multiple countries. Tiani is implementing identical measures simultaneously. As 3 countries acting in perfect coordination, we will force France to fight on 3 separate fronts, something that will be exponentially more difficult than isolating and punishing a single nation. Traoré stood up from his chair, energized by the adrenaline of this historic moment. Assimi, this is extremely risky, but it represents the correct path forward. How will we coordinate our actions to ensure maximum effectiveness and minimize the possibility of retaliation? Ibrahim, now I'm going to share the most crucial information with you. We are not taking these decisions in isolation or without international support. We have received strong commitments from both China and Russia. We have negotiated agreements to sell our gold reserves directly to China, bypassing Western financial institutions entirely, and Russia has committed to providing defense technology and security cooperation. This information was not entirely surprising to Traoré, as preliminary discussions had been ongoing for months, but the timing was absolutely perfect for maximum impact. Assimi, do we have our media strategy fully prepared and coordinated? Absolutely, Ibrahim. Today at exactly 4 p.m., all 3 countries will simultaneously hold press conferences announcing these decisions. International media representatives are already scrambling to reach our respective capitals. After this phone conversation ends, there will be no possibility of retreat or reversal. Traoré glanced at his watch, 2:32 p.m. Only 90 seconds had passed since the call began, but in those 90 seconds, the future trajectory of Africa had been fundamentally altered in ways that would reverberate for generations. Assimi, economic sanctions from Western powers are absolutely certain. Are we fully prepared to weather that storm? Ibrahim, we have addressed that challenge comprehensively. We have secured commitments from Algeria and Egypt to provide support during the transition period. Several Arab nations have agreed to accept our new currencies for oil trade, which means we will no longer be dependent on dollar-denominated transactions for our energy needs. This news sent shockwaves through the cabinet members present in Traoré's office, as they realized that their president had not merely been planning Burkina Faso's future, but orchestrating the economic independence of an entire region through a complex web of international partnerships. What about security concerns? France has demonstrated willingness to use military intervention in the past when its interests are threatened. Ibrahim, we have made extensive preparations in that area as well. Russia has made clear its commitment to protecting its growing influence in West Africa, and China is determined to secure its trade routes and investments. We are no longer isolated or defensible targets for Western military intervention. Dembélé's voice was becoming increasingly excited as he outlined the scope of their preparations. Ibrahim, you should know that this phone conversation is being recorded by multiple intelligence services, both ours and almost certainly French intelligence. But that doesn't matter anymore. In fact, We want the world to hear that Africa is finally making its own decisions without seeking permission from former colonial powers. Traoré smiled broadly, understanding that this transparency was actually a strategic advantage. Assimi, that's exactly what I wanted. This conversation should serve as a message to the entire international community about Africa's new direction. We have 30 seconds remaining, Ibrahim. When we hang up this phone, none of us will ever be the same, and Africa will never be the same either. Traoré took a deep breath, feeling the weight of history settling on his shoulders. Assimi, we have been waiting 60 years for this moment. We are finally fulfilling Thomas Sankara's vision of genuine African independence.
Yes, Ibrahim.
And understand that this movement will not be limited to just the three of us. Other African countries will join this initiative. We have received positive signals from Senegal President Macky Sall, and Ghana's Akufo-Addo is seriously considering similar measures. This is extraordinary, Assimi. What are our immediate next steps? Now we hang up the phone and make history, Ibrahim. We'll meet again at 4 p.m. during our press conferences. Africa's new era begins today. When the phone call ended, a profound silence filled the room. The cabinet members could sense that they had just witnessed a historic moment that would be remembered for generations. This 3-minute and 18-second conversation had changed not only the future of 3 countries, but potentially the entire African continent. Traoré placed the phone back in its cradle and turned to address his cabinet members with a gravity befitting the magnitude of what had just transpired. My colleagues, now the real work begins. In less than 2 hours, we will announce to the world decisions that will produce irreversible consequences for our nation and our continent.
Finance Minister Dr.
Coulibaly, still processing the implications of what she had just witnessed, asked with visible concern, Mr. President, isn't making such rapid decisions extremely risky? Have we fully calculated all possible economic consequences of coordinated action with Mali and Niger? Rosine, Traoré responded with unwavering determination, we have been living with the consequences of the current economic system for 60 years. 70% of our population lives in poverty, our natural resources are systematically plundered by foreign corporations, and our young people attempt to flee to Europe because they see no future here. Could there possibly be worse economic consequences than what we are already experiencing? Interior Minister Damiba raised the security concerns that were weighing on everyone's mind. What about our security situation? Could France actually resort to military intervention as they have done in other African countries in the past? Paul-Henri, France is no longer the France of previous decades. They have lost popular support in Mali and Burkina Faso, and the international context has changed dramatically. Russia and China are now protecting their interests in Africa, which means France cannot act unilaterally without risking a much larger conflict. Foreign Minister Ruamba, still thinking about the immediate diplomatic crisis, asked, Mr. President, Ambassador Bertin is still waiting for a response to his meeting request. What should we tell him? Olivia, please inform the ambassador that the time for ultimatums has passed. We are now opening a new chapter in our relationship with France, one based on equality rather than subordination. Traoré opened a thick file that had been sitting on his desk throughout the meeting. This file contains detailed plans that we have been secretly developing over the past 6 months. New currency mechanisms, trade agreements with non-Western partners, security protocols, technological infrastructure, everything has been prepared for this moment. Defense Minister Colonel Caboret, understanding the military implications, asked, Mr. President, is our army prepared for potential conflict situations? Caboret, our military is prepared for defense, but our objective is independence, not conflict. If we use our strength correctly and maintain the element of coordinated surprise, no one will dare to engage us in direct confrontation. By 3 p.m., every cabinet member understood their specific roles in the implementation of this historic decision. The press conference was 1 hour away, and international media representatives were already flooding into Ouagadougou. CNN, BBC, France 24, Al Jazeera, representatives from every major international news network were now present in the city, sensing that a major story was about to break. Traoré withdrew to his private office for final preparations before facing the world media. His advisor Dr. Aminata Kone brought him the prepared speech text, but her expression reflected deep concern about the magnitude of what was about to unfold. Mr. President, the speech is ready, but Ibrahim, there will be no going back after this announcement. Are you absolutely certain about this course of action? Traoré looked into Dr. Kone's worried eyes, understanding that her concerns reflected genuine care for both him personally and their country's future. Aminata, you listened to that phone conversation. This is not just my decision in isolation. 3 countries have reached the same conclusion simultaneously. This represents not a personal choice, but a historical necessity that can no longer be avoided.
Mr.
President, the economic pressures will be severe and immediate. Our people may suffer significantly during the transition period. Aminata, our people are already suffering and have been suffering for 60 years under the current system. Now, at least, their suffering will have a purpose, achieving genuine freedom and independence. At 3:45 p.m., Traoré prepared to enter the press conference hall. The room was packed with national and international media representatives, creating an atmosphere that was electric with anticipation. Everyone understood that they were about to witness one of the most important announcements in Burkina Faso's history since independence. At precisely that moment, Traoré's secure phone rang once again. This time it was Niger President Tiani calling to coordinate final details.
Ibrahim, are you ready?
Dembélé just started his press conference in Bamako, and the international reaction is already intense. Now it's your turn to make history. Tiani, I'll be honest, I'm nervous but absolutely determined to follow through. Ibrahim, remember that this victory belongs not just to us, but to all of Africa. Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah, they all dreamed of this day when Africa would finally control its own destiny. After ending the call, Traoré took one final look at himself in the mirror. He saw a 34-year-old leader who was about to change the trajectory of an entire continent, understanding that while his age was young, it was sufficient to reshape Africa's future. At exactly 4 p.m., Ibrahim Traoré stepped up to the podium. The packed auditorium fell into complete silence as the world waited to hear words that would reshape international relations in West Africa and potentially across the entire continent. My dear citizens, distinguished members of the press, Traoré began, his voice carrying both the weight of history and the confidence of absolute conviction. Today marks a turning point in Burkina Faso's history. Following consultations with the presidents of Mali and Niger, our 3 countries have made decisions that will fundamentally alter our relationship with the international community. The room became tense with anticipation as cameras focused intently on every word and gesture. First decision: Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are completely withdrawing from the CFA franc system, effective immediately. We will now use our own national currencies backed by our own gold reserves and natural resources. The auditorium erupted with activity as journalists began frantically taking notes and asking for clarification. Second decision: we are serving formal notice that all French military bases must be closed within 30 days, and all foreign military personnel must leave our territories. This announcement caused an immediate sensation, with French journalists standing up and demanding immediate responses. Third decision: we are nationalizing all natural resources currently under foreign control. Our gold, uranium, and oil will now be managed exclusively for the benefit of our own people. Traoré continued without pause, understanding that any hesitation would be interpreted as uncertainty. These decisions are not made solely for our own benefit, but for the independence of all Africa. We are ending 60 years of systematic economic exploitation that has enriched foreign powers while impoverishing our own people. A French journalist immediately requested permission to speak. President Traoré, aren't these decisions tantamount to economic suicide? How do you expect to survive without France's economic support and expertise? Traoré smiled confidently before responding, distinguished journalist, France survives because of us, not the other way around. Billions of dollars are extracted from Africa every year, while the amount that returns to benefit our people is negligible. We are simply reclaiming control of our own wealth. Another journalist pressed further, what about the reaction of the international community? Aren't you concerned about economic sanctions and diplomatic isolation? When you refer to the international community, exactly whom do you mean? China, Russia, India, Brazil, and Arab nations are supporting our initiatives. What remains is only the West, and the West no longer represents the entire world or controls global economic relationships. Traoré's statements created massive reverberations in international media, with CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera providing live coverage of these developments as they unfolded in real time. After the press conference concluded, Traoré returned to his office to find his phones ringing constantly with calls from across Africa and around the world. The first call came from Senegal President Macky Sall. Ibrahim, I watched your live broadcast, and these are truly courageous decisions. Senegal is carefully considering how we should position ourselves in relation to these developments. Macky, our door is always open. West Africa is stronger when we act together in coordination. The second call came from Ghana, where President Akufo-Addo reported, Ibrahim, your decisions are being debated intensively in Ghana's parliament, and there are positive approaches emerging from multiple political parties. The third call came from an unexpected source. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. Ibrahim, South Africa officially supports the steps you have taken. We can explore cooperation opportunities within the Continental Free Trade Area framework. That evening at 8 p.m., Traoré made one final phone call of this historic day. Dembélé from Mali was calling to assess the day's overall impact. Ibrahim, today's results have been extraordinary. The press conferences from all three countries became headline news in international media. The hashtag #AfricaIndependence has become a trending topic globally. Assimi, what's most important is the popular reaction. How are people responding? Ibrahim, thousands of people took to the streets in Bamako to demonstrate their support for our decisions. How is the situation in Ouagadougou? The response here has been similarly positive. Young people are particularly enthusiastic because they understand that they may no longer need to flee to Europe to find opportunities. Ibrahim, the process that began today with a 3-minute phone conversation will become a turning point in African history that will be remembered for generations. 1 week later, the effects of the decisions made by the three countries began to crystallize in ways that both supporters and critics had anticipated. France, as expected, implemented immediate economic sanctions. The European Union suspended all aid programs. The IMF cancelled existing credit lines and refused to consider new loan applications. However, unexpected developments also began to emerge that demonstrated the changing global balance of power. China signed major trade agreements with all three countries, offering immediate market access for their natural resources. Russia provided technology transfers and military cooperation agreements. India initiated agricultural cooperation programs. Turkey offered support for infrastructure construction projects. Most significantly, messages of support continued to arrive from other African countries, creating momentum for a continent-wide movement. Tanzania, Zambia, Angola, one by one, they began taking similar steps toward greater economic independence from former colonial powers. 3 months later, economic data revealed surprising results that confounded Western predictions of immediate economic collapse. Gold sales revenues had doubled compared to previous years because direct sales eliminated intermediary companies and commissions. Resource extraction was now benefiting the countries where the resources originated rather than enriching foreign corporations. 6 months after the historic phone call, the West African Gold Union was officially established. In addition to Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger, Chad, Mauritania, and Senegal also joined this new economic partnership that promised to fundamentally alter trade relationships across the region. 1 year later, Ibrahim Traoré addressed the African Union Summit with words that summarized the transformation that had occurred 1 year ago. A 3-minute phone conversation resulted in decisions that have now become the hope of 1.2 billion Africans for genuine independence and economic sovereignty. That 3-minute phone conversation had indeed changed Africa's future in ways that exceeded even the most optimistic projections. The determination demonstrated by Traoré, Dembélé, and Tiani had provided courage to other African leaders who had been waiting for someone to take the first bold step toward genuine independence. Today, that historic phone conversation is remembered as Africa's second independence, representing the moment when political independence finally began to translate into economic independence. Every June 18th is now celebrated as West African Independence Day, commemorating the moment when 3 young leaders decided that Africa's wealth should benefit Africa's people. Ibrahim Traoré thought he was simply making a phone call that day. In reality, he was changing the destiny of an entire continent, proving that sometimes the most significant changes in history begin with a single conversation between leaders who refuse to accept the status quo any longer.